Ketones also for recovery have certain benefits. They help your body to repair faster. They have signaling benefits beyond just being a source of calories themselves. So it's almost this magic molecule. It's like, I think of it as a nutritional primitive. It's like this core building block where, we're all doing metabolism all the time. So if you're trying to be a pro cyclist, or you're trying to do the ketogenic diet, or you're trying to just have an afternoon energy boost without spiking your blood sugar, because that's not good for you, that it's not every day that a new nutritional primitive comes along that can be applied to this kind of breadth of scenarios.
Today's episode is with Michael Brandt. Michael is the co-founder and CEO of Health via Modern Nutrition, also known as H.V.M.N. H.V.M.N. is a metabolic health company on a mission to redefine the limits of human performance, metabolism, and longevity. Michael is an avid triathlete and marathoner, and prior to starting H.V.M.N., he received his BS in computer science and design at Stanford. He was a product manager at Google and an adjunct professor at the Academy of Art in San Francisco. In this episode, Michael and I are chatting all about exogenous ketones, why and how ketones can be beneficial to your metabolism, differences between common types of exogenous ketones found on the market today, how athletes and non-athletes can benefit from exogenous ketones, and lots more. So if you've been following along with me and this podcast for a while, I don't particularly promote the use of exogenous ketones for the average person. And I chat more about why that has been the case in this episode with Michael, so stay tuned for that. But you'll hear us talk about technology and how it's ever evolving, and the ketone ester that we discuss in this episode is a little bit different than any of the other exogenous ketones that I've personally seen or tried in the past. I've been in this space for a while and I've tried a lot of different things. So with this particular product, I've actually been testing out on myself for the past week, and I can tell you from my honest opinion that when taking the recommended dose, I have noticed a slight boost in my mental sharpness and focus, and a bit of that kind of euphoric feeling that you may notice if you've ever been in a state of ketosis. The taste definitely takes some getting used to, and I found mixing it with like a flavored drink and chasing it with that drink is probably the most pleasant experience. If you've heard of ketone esters in the past, one of the reasons why it's been so hard to bring ketone esters to the market is because they have a very, very pungent taste. H.V.M.N. has been able to do this with a palatable drink. Again, I would recommend chasing it with something flavored, like a, Zero Gatorade, or, is that what it's called? Zero Gatorade. Or that's what I use. That's why I said that. Or any other flavored drink, just to kind of mask some of the aftertaste. But anyway, that being said, everyone is their own individual and responds differently to certain things, right? So, and we also have to realize, and we talk about this a lot in the episode, this is of course not a magic drink that will cure all of your problems. No supplement will do that, right? But if this episode gets you intrigued and you want to try it for yourself, Michael has provided me with a special discount code for all viewers and listeners of MetFlex and Chill. So I'll add all the details in the description below, or you can go to hvmn.com and use the code METFLEX for a discount on your order. Like anything else though, make sure you do your own research and test and assess for yourself. Alrighty, without further ado, let's get into this episode with Michael Brandt. Welcome back to MetFlex and Chill. This is your host, Rachel Gregory, and I'm here with Michael Brandt. How are you today? I'm
great, Rachel. Thanks for having me on.
I'm excited to have you. I'm excited to dive in. Wow, my voice is already going, not a good start. I'm excited to dive into all things ketones today and kind of get a little bit more of your background. So let's start with that. Why don't you give us just a background on who you are, how you got into the health and fitness space, your company, all that jazz.
So my name is Michael Brandt. I'm from Chicago originally. I studied computer science at Stanford in undergrad, was a big software engineer. And my first job out of college, I worked at YouTube, like back in the 2011, 12, like early days of YouTube. And I started getting into biohacking. So applying that same engineering mindset to the human body. What can you do to improve your outcomes, whether that's living longer, running a faster marathon, losing weight? So there's all these tools that have begun to proliferate. I think, 5-10 years ago, they were more fringe, like tracking your footsteps or doing a cheek swab to get your personal genotype, or wearing a continuous glucose monitor. Back when I was first wearing continuous glucose monitors, had to order it off of European eBay because it wasn't street legal in the United States. So, and now you have things like Levels and NutriSense that are more over the counter, just easy, directly accessible. So got really early into this area that, it used to be called biohacking. I think by this point, we've crossed the chasm to where a ton of people are tracking their footsteps and a ton of people are dabbling with a continuous glucose monitor. So I got really into that. I became a semi-pro marathon runner. I run 6-minute miles for the marathon, running Boston Marathon. And, I'm not gonna win the Olympics or something, but I'm, faster than a lot of people. And I got quick very quickly by tracking every aspect. Like I track my heart rate, I track my cadence, taking the same systems approach, biohacking approach to my health and performance, and experimenting, reading literature, doing like pushing more on what's working, letting go of what doesn't work. And along the way, also built this company, H.V.M.N Modern Nutrition. My co-founder, we met in undergrad, and back when the keto diet was really first trending in like 2016, 17, we thought it's interesting. Keto diet's good for some people, like not necessarily the thing for everyone, but what's really interesting is the ketone itself. So in 2017, we were the first ever to launch a ketone drink. And it was you just drink it. It's the same ketone your body makes. It looked like, we don't sell it anymore. We sell V2 of it now. This is what V1 looked like. And our first big customer was the US DOD. So we have a $6 million contract with Special Operations Command, basically cutting edge of endurance, performance, nutrition. We work with cyclists, riders, NBA, NFL, top athletes across every sport, and also just a lot of everyday people. Our whole thesis on ketone is that it's like collagen or CBD insofar as it's a nutritional primitive that now that we figured out a way to make it, and you can just directly drink a ketone, directly elevate your ketone levels, that opens up a ton of doors for a ton of people, whether you're a pro cyclist or you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to improve your longevity biomarkers. That having access to a pure, direct, drinkable ketone is a really interesting tool in the toolkit. Mm-hmm. We just launched version 2 of our product. So version 1 was very expensive. It's very like science fair project mode. Like this puppy costs $30. It's like, we call it, I could barely afford it with my employee discount. Very expensive. We just launched version 2, which we call Ketone IQ, and it's on H.V.M.N.com. And we basically figured out the way more affordable way to make a directly drinkable ketone. For those who have maybe tried a ketone ester in the past, they've tasted kind of crazy. We've figured out a way to make it like it's drinkable now. And so we just launched that. We're off to the races and getting the word out, answering questions, doing good science around it.
Cool. Awesome. Yeah. I mean, first of all, I'm definitely a data nerd too. So it's cool to chat with someone who's all about that. Just like yourself, I got into keto back in like 2015. I did the first study on looking at the ketogenic diet in CrossFit athletes, non-elite CrossFit athletes. So, obviously back then exogenous ketones weren't even a thing, right? Even just like the salts on the market now. So, I have kind of grown over the years. I guess it's now 2022. So that was back 7 years ago, if I do the math right. Just kind of, in the space a lot and kind of seeing kind of the ebbs and flows of the different supplements on the market, especially related to ketones. And so I'm really excited to kind of dive into a little bit of the background on exogenous ketones, and for our listeners to just get a little bit familiar with kind of exactly, what exogenous ketones are. And maybe we can start off with just talking generally about the benefits of ketones in themselves for your metabolism. So whether or not you produce them yourself, so endogenously, or taking them exogenously, and we can kind of dive into maybe the differences between that as well. But what are kind of the main benefits of, ketones in general for your metabolism? Obviously, this podcast is called MetFlex and Chill, so we're all about metabolic flexibility, obviously. So can we dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, I think you teed it up really well, that there's ketones. There's really 2 types of ways that your body can have elevated ketone levels, either through producing it yourself endogenously when your body is low on carbohydrate, low on blood glucose, your blood insulin drops and your body will start to make ketones. A lot of people are interested in that angle because your body is burning fat, turning it into ketones. Exogenous ketones, same ketone, but totally different, where it's you're drinking it, you're adding calories to your system, you're drinking a ketone, and it has a different set of benefits, right? Because that ketone is not coming directly from you burning fat, but it is doing things like directly providing energy to your brain. Ketones cross the blood-brain barrier. So you immediately get this ketone rush, the same rush that people feel when they're like doing a extended fast, or if they're really adhering to the ketogenic diet, that feeling of sharpness, instead of doing keto diet for 2-3 weeks to get there, or fasting for several days. Like I've done a 7-day long fast, and like you definitely get dialed in the middle of that. It's really cool to be able to drink something that gets you to that spot in like 15 minutes. So there's a mental component. Ketones themselves are very satiating. So there's a study done on ketones versus dextrose, so sugar. And if you take the same amount of calories of both, it was isocaloric, so same amount of calories of both, when they would feed them to participants, placebo-controlled, double-blinded, that participants felt significantly more satiated by the same number of calories of a ketone. And when they measured ghrelin, so the hunger hormone, ghrelin was suppressed more so with ketones than with sugar. So it's not the case that all calories are created equal, right? Some calories will do a better job. If you have 100 calories, they'll do a better job of satiating you versus not. That's why so many people love the ketogenic diet, and ketones plug into that exactly, where it can help you to extend a fast, or it can help you to be compliant with the ketogenic diet because it's making you feel satiated with relatively not a lot of calories. There's a lot of other benefits too, right? Because when we talk about pro cycling, like Tour de France teams are a major customer of ours. And as we're pushing into more and more sports leagues, a lot of times what they'll do, they'll actually dual fuel. So they'll have ketones and carbs at the same time, which not something that's not the ketogenic diet. So it's not something I would recommend to someone who definitely wants to do ketogenic diet, but for an elite performer, their mission is to get as much available metabolites into their mitochondria at the same time as possible during performance. And so the same way that you want a bunch of different types of carbohydrates, you want dextrose and fructose and glucose, like you want a breadth of types of carbohydrates, you also would want ketones coming into the equation as well to improve performance. Ketones also for recovery have certain benefits. They help your body to repair faster. They have signaling benefits beyond just being a source of calories themselves. So it's almost this magic molecule. It's like, I think of it as a nutritional primitive. It's like this core building block where, we're all doing metabolism all the time. So if you're trying to be a pro cyclist, or you're trying to do the ketogenic diet, or you're trying to just have an afternoon energy boost without spiking your blood sugar, because that's not good for you, that it's not every day that a new nutritional primitive comes along that can be applied to this kind of breadth of scenarios.
Yeah. I mean, all the things that you mentioned are obviously super, super important in terms of the benefits of ketones themselves. And I like how you put it in the beginning when you mentioned it's another tool in the toolbox, because I think that's what a lot of people get confused on in the kind of the mainstream, especially when they see things marketed, exogenous ketones, or you're going like your average GNC or on Amazon, and you have these ketone supplements that are like, lose this amount of weight in this amount of time. And they're like, oh, I'll just drink this and follow my normal diet and magic will happen. I think that's where exogenous ketones has gotten a really bad rap over the years, is because we've kind of taken that and people are misinterpreting the effectiveness of it, but in the sense of they're kind of utilizing it for the wrong reasons, if that makes sense, or they're just not educated on how they can be beneficial, but in combination with other things that you're doing, obviously. So, I mean, just kind of full disclosure, I've been a skeptic of exogenous ketones throughout the years, but as I learn more about them, as I learn more about the differences between kind of the ketones that you might find, like I said, on Amazon, your average GNC, the ketone salts, versus the ketone esters, and just diving into the research myself, there's been a lot more coming out recently and over the years about the benefits of them. Obviously, you just chat about a few of those, but can we dive into, just so the listeners understand kind of the differences between those exogenous ketone salts and the esters, and why buying a ketone at your average GNC versus an ester from a company like yours would be more beneficial?
Yes, that's a great question. I agree with what you're saying. There's bad rap of it being put out as this panacea. Like, look, if you have a donut and you have some ketones, you just had a donut and some ketones. Like, that's a lot. Like, that all has calories in it. Like, the ketone doesn't like Command Z undo the donut somehow. Yeah. It can be part of fasting and exercising and all of that metabolically healthy lifestyle. But yeah, there's no, I don't know. I'm sure people know, like, if you're on your personal mission for health and well-being, there's not really shortcuts. You can wear a better pair of running shoes, but it's not going to go and do the run for you, right? You can have better tool in your toolkit, but you still have to adhere to an overall healthy diet. Okay, so there's a few different buckets of types of ketones out there. There's something called, so our ketone is it's just directly a ketone. A ketone salt it's literally a ketone bounded with a salt molecule, so sodium or potassium or magnesium. It's a very cheap and dirty way to make a ketone, because you're literally, if you want X amount of ketones, you're also having X amount of salt load. And what does that mean? It means that, okay, I want to elevate my ketones to 1.0 millimole. It feels good when I'm in ketosis. Okay, well, you're also to drink enough of a ketone salt or eat enough of a ketone salt to elevate your blood ketone level to that point, that desired endpoint. You are having a lot of salt, and so that causes for a lot of people stomach upset. It just limits the amount that you can even eat. Like, maybe you can get to 1.0, but you can't get to 2.0 or 3.0, or where the performance benefits start being really interesting. So I'm not going to say there's like no application of it, but I would say like ketone salts is this kind of quick and dirty way. There's like that you can like have some ketones in your system, but you're also having a lot of other kind of unintended byproduct in your system as well. There's a few different types of esters out there. An ester, if people remember their high school chemistry, is it basically like you're gluing two molecules together. So it's like you're taking blank and blank, X and Y, and you're esterifying them together. So there's multiple different kinds of esters out there. So our first drink-free version 1.0 from us, it was an ester. It was an ester of like two different, very similar types of ketones that both turn into blood BHB. One was just like straight BHB acid, and the other side of the ester was BDO, which converts on first pass in your liver directly into BHB, and then they're esterized together, esterified together. That was our V1 product. We looked at it, and we actually came to the conclusion that the esterification is really expensive and adds a lot of novelty. Like, it's, lets you make patents, and it's very novel from a scientific perspective, but it's kind of like the 8-track player. It's like it's this over-engineered technology. And so what we did with our version 2 is that we actually simplified down. So our version 2 here is just BDO, which has allowed us to go way more affordable, and it's directly a ketone. So there's no salt, there's no anything. It's just like this pure molecule that immediately raises blood ketone levels. No salt, no potassium, no anything. And that's opened up a lot of doors because it lets people get to a more significant level. So it lets people get to the levels where, like, in these studies where we're seeing like recovery benefits, it's like people will have to be at a significant level of blood ketones, 1.0, 1.5, 2.0. We're now able to do that for like $10, where it used to be like with salts, it's not even possible. And then with like old ester form, it was like $30+. More people had to take multiple servings. So that's the lay of the land in a nutshell. One way to think about it is like carbohydrates have been on the market for forever, right? But even really like modern performance carbohydrates, starting with Gatorade in the 70s, it's like and you look at your goo gel now today, it's like there's a lot of a difference between a banana versus maltodextrose versus fructose. Like, so the carbohydrate market in a sense is like very advanced and nuanced. And I think we're still very early, like first inning with ketones, and some are way more fancy Ferrari engine. Some are more like quick, cheap and dirty. Some are more like, I think our brand promise, our goal is to find the best value in terms of raising blood ketones per dollar. And I think we've delivered on that. So there's a few different plays in the market right now, I'd say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. And I like that you kind of compared it to carbohydrates in terms of the different, supplemental carbohydrates within athletics and things like that. And I think that, ketones in themselves is just something that the technology, like even, when I was talking about, 6 years ago when the ketogenic diet started to become more popular for the mainstream, this technology was obviously like not around, or it wasn't mainstream, right? And so I think like I'm really excited to kind of see how the next few years go, and just knowing kind of what's on the horizon for ketone esters. Cause I know like back a few years ago, it was, like you said, super, super expensive to even just get like a small ester. I remember I went to like the Metabolic Health Summit a few years ago. I think it was the first year. I don't know if you know that conference.
I'm going this year. Yeah, we've been there.
Oh,
People
nice.
on my team have been in the past. I'm going this. Are you going this year?
I am not sure yet. So I've been all past years. It's only like it used to be up in LA. So I'm in San Diego, so it's only a short drive. Now it's in Santa Barbara, I believe, but I'm still on the fence about this year. But for me, it's like a reunion with all my friends because like I mentioned, I got kind of in this space back in the day when, it wasn't super popular. So I made a lot of connections, a lot of friends who became, really good friends. And so it's always like kind of like a reunion when we go to these conferences. But anyway, so I might be there. We'll see.
Maybe see you there.
Yeah. But yeah, like I was saying, so a few years ago, like just having, I remember like people were passing around like this little ketone ester, and it was like something that just like wasn't out yet. And it was like kind of super secretive because it was still like in the making. So it's kind of cool to see where things have gone. But for me, I'm always trying to bring, the best information to my clients and my listeners, and really kind of allow them to, make their own decisions within these things, and really see how it fits into their lives if they're going to kind of use a supplement, right? Because like you said in the beginning, it's a tool in the toolbox. Supplements can be beneficial, but they're not, no supplement is a magic pill or anything like that. So I want to dive into a little bit of the benefits of, well, first of all, actually, I do have a question. So when it comes to exogenous ketones, obviously, like you said, they do have calories. So is it the same as the calories and the amount of fat? So 9 calories per gram, or is it different?
So I'm holding it right here. It's 10 grams has 70 calories. So 7 calories per gram. And that a corollary to that point is that ketones can be considered their own macronutrient. Like a lot of people have been calling it this fourth macronutrient, where you have fat, carbs, proteins, and now ketones, like they don't have the same amount of calories per gram. They behave differently in the system. They're a different, like your body, yes, can make them from fat, but I think it's correct to consider them a fourth macronutrient because they have enough different characteristics.
Yeah. Yeah. And people can kind of think about it too. Obviously, definitely not the same benefits, but alcohol has 7 calories per gram, and alcohol is its own, I guess you could say macronutrient in itself, but it's got maybe the opposite benefits.
Yeah. It's a very good point. A lot of people actually are getting interested in ketones for that exact reason of alcohol replacement, where because ketones, you feel there's some on the way to you as we speak. And you try it when you take a sip of it, or you take a shot of it, or you mix it into something, you feel it. It's not the same as being drunk at all. It's maybe more close to caffeine, although it's still pretty different from caffeine. You just kind of, your eyes feel open and perked up. And so that nice little buzz, like people will mix ketones with soda water and have that as like an afternoon aperitif instead of a, vodka and soda. So I think that's really interesting because the alcohol replacement market is really heating up. And I think that ketones are really interesting because it's not just like, hey, this thing kind of tastes like gin, but really it's inert flavored water. It's like, no, this actually like replaces alcohol and it still gives you some zippiness. I think that makes it really interesting for people to swap, like more interesting than just the inert flavored water, because you can actually do something with it.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. So I want to dive a little bit deeper into kind of the benefits for different populations. So within athletics, obviously we kind of talked about endurance training. I went through a period of time in college. I did triathlons, as you mentioned, you're an avid marathoner. And then when I went to grad school, I actually transitioned to CrossFit, just to try something new. And that's kind of how I came about, the first study on ketogenic and in non-elite CrossFit athletes. But with that, so within the different types of sports, right? Endurance training, strength training, high intensity interval training, such as CrossFit. Kind of over the years, I got a lot of pushback, looking at the ketogenic diet in CrossFit athletes. And I always preface this, it was non-elite CrossFit athletes, meaning just kind of your average Joe who goes to CrossFit. But kind of looking back, and as I've kind of grown throughout my research and just understanding the concept of dual fuel and the concept of metabolic flexibility and being able to use the different fuel sources, and it's not just like, hey, you're doing CrossFit, that's a high intensity sport, you're only using glucose. Yes and no. So I want to kind of talk about how ketones could potentially be beneficial for that type of realm. So the high intensity realm, high intensity interval training, kind of short bursts of activity such as CrossFit, or Orange Theory or Barry's Bootcamp or whatever, like those kind of, circuit style classes. How could exogenous ketones potentially be beneficial in that realm? And maybe kind of talking to that dual fuel aspect of things.
Yeah. I think that's a really good framing of it, where you're always using everything. You're always using glucose and ketones, and it's really a matter of dialing how much you're using of what. Generally, the higher intensity, like if you go and run 400, you run a lap around the track, it's very glycolytic. You're going to need a lot of sugar. Your body's just not going to have that much time to tap into ketones or tap into fat and turn it into ketones. On the other end of the spectrum, I ran the Burning Man ultra marathon, 50K out in the middle of the desert, many hours, and when you're doing ultra marathon, you're definitely not. You can't be glycolytic the whole time. You can't be mainly depending on glucose because you don't have enough glucose on deck. So part of what you do in training, building up to a marathon or ultra marathon or triathlon, Ironman, is you do these lower intensity runs. Sometimes people like to do it in a fasted state where you train your body to be able to do two things. One is to be able to create ketones, pull them from fat. Your body develops more enzymes to be able to do that. And then on the second half, your body develops more enzymes to metabolize ketones and turn them into ATP on game time. So what I generally say, unless someone's really, dead set that they love being a ketogenic athlete and that's their peak performance, for most people, I would say you want to train metabolically flexibly, do some exercises, low carbs, but definitely if it's a day where you're trying to get peak performance, you want carbs and you want the metabolic flexibility of your body is good at creating ketones and drink some ketones, and your body is good at turning ketones into ATP and have goo shots, every 45 minutes. So it's not this either or thing. It's an equation that can be balanced. Yeah. And I would say, especially as you go longer duration, lower intensity stuff, that's where really the fat burning ketones kick in.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think one thing that people kind of think about, we're saying, the glycolytic sport versus a more aerobic sport. So aerobic versus anaerobic metabolism. People kind of think that it's this light switch that goes off, or goes on or off. And it's you're either you're using aerobic metabolism or anaerobic metabolism, but it doesn't work like that. We're constantly going back and forth, even in a sport like CrossFit, for example. I'm just using that because it's something that people don't think about necessarily, in the sense of those workouts. Yeah, maybe they can be a minute long, but typically they're longer than that, especially a typical, AMRAP, or even if we're looking at CrossFit athletes who maybe are more elite, they're doing multiple sessions a day, right? So they're doing a session in the morning, they're doing a session in the afternoon. The CrossFit games, those are long long workouts. They're not just like 5-10 minutes. And so the fact that, like you said, becoming more metabolically flexible and being able to use those different fuel sources is going to advantage you just from a practical standpoint. If you think about it, the more fuel you have available, the more fuel you can tap into from those different aspects, the better off you're probably going to be, not just from a exercise standpoint, but also from a recovery standpoint as well, right? So you were kind of talking about the ultra marathons, things like that, but I think it definitely does have application to basically every sport, right? Maybe not that 10-second, run that's very, very glycolytic, but the recovery side of that, like there is implication for everything. So yeah, I think that definitely makes sense if you just think about it kind of practically. From a like non-athlete perspective, we kind of already talked about some of the benefits for someone, sorry, who might just be, just like not even consider themselves an athlete, or they maybe just do like traditional strength training or hypertrophy training a few days a week. The rest of the time, they're kind of just at their desk all day. So can you kind of just mention some of the, talk a little bit more about those benefits of how ketones particularly benefit your brain? And maybe we can dive into some of them, like either the mechanisms, and we don't have to get super, super sciencey, but kind of how exogenous ketones were first even discovered, and how they can benefit, brain health, and how they've benefited maybe traumatic brain injury and some of the research we have on that. Maybe we can chat a little bit about that.
Yeah. That's, I think, a really good area to look at. How were ketones discovered in the first place? So to begin with, like the human body's always made ketones. So in a sense, like there was no discovery it's like, did Columbus discover America, or was America always there? Like ketones have all 300,000 years. The human body makes ketones. Other animals also make ketones. Ketones are also found in small amounts in avocados and red pepper, capsicum, and mint leaves. So like ketones are naturally occurring. About 100 years ago, so early 20th century was the first therapeutic applications of ketones. Again, there was no drinkable ketone at the time. It was all ketogenic diet. They showed that patients that adhered to the ketogenic diet were able to reduce instances of seizures, that these kids were having seizures because of their brain's inability to properly metabolize glucose. So if you put them on a strict ketogenic diet and they have elevated blood ketone levels, those ketones cross the blood-brain barrier and recover cognitive performance. So that's early 20th century. A lot of great science during the 20th century, understanding how the Krebs cycle works, understanding how intermittent fasting plays into all of this, or extended fasting plays into all this. In the early 2000s, DARPA, the Defense Advanced Research Project Agency, so they're part of a wing of the United States military that does like super far future stuff. So they invented the internet like in the 70s, right? They invented radio, and they do a lot of like frontier technology. DARPA in the early 2000s had a program in partnership with the National Institute of Health, NIH, called Operation Metabolic Dominance, which is a pretty cool name if you ask me. And the idea there was to optimize soldier performance for cognitively and physically demanding missions. They did the basic science on it, where they were able to isolate a ketone, manufacture it, show that it converts into ATP, uses less oxygen than glucose to do so, super efficient molecule, but it was super expensive. It was like, I mean, we're saying that we're talking $20,000 for a shot like this, and tasted just completely crazy, tasted like nail polish remover. So a lot of the people that have been around the metabolic health space, even longer than us, like when they've tried the early stuff, it's like, whoa, like there's these stories like early days of like Team Sky, one of the pro cycling teams, had a bottle and they like dropped it, and like during a race, and like everyone freaked out, like the car had to pull over and pick it up. So that's kind of where they came from. And again, like in 2016, 17, my co-founder and I, we looked at it, and we thought this would be really interesting to productize, because the level of awareness around ketones was ready for it. It just seemed like personally interesting. And yeah, fast forwarding a bit. Okay, so how is this interesting for brain health, TBI, Alzheimer's? So we've said a few different times here that ketones cross the blood-brain barrier. That's the entire reason that we evolved the ability to produce ketones, is that your body can only store on deck so much carbohydrates, like 2,000 calories of carbohydrates. So like a day or two, if you fast and don't, or eat really low carb, or especially if you fast, you're going to blow through, or you're running a lot, running an ultra marathon, you're going to blow through those carbohydrate stores. Your body, you can't just keel over and die, right? Your body needs to supply, especially your brain. Humans have big brains relative to other animals. You need to supply your brain with some form of energy. That's where ketones step in. Fats cannot cross the blood-brain barrier. So you have to have ketones in order to cognitively function in a fasting or starved or high endurance state. Okay, so now that there's a drinkable ketone, a lot of folks are interested in, okay, I'm an Alzheimer's researcher, I'm a TBI researcher, I'm hearing that this thing can cross the blood-brain barrier. Oh, interesting, because when you have TBI, there's some damage done at the moment of impact. Like, the glass is shattered, like there's certain damages done at the moment of impact. There's also over the trailing several days and weeks, there's a swelling that prevents nutrition from getting to the brain. So like the amount of energy, the amount of ATP getting created in the brain goes down over that following period because of your brain's inability to get glucose in. Ketones, not blocked by the same pathways. Ketones require less oxygen to turn into ATP. So you're able to recover kind of ability after a TBI. There's similar, same but different with Alzheimer's, where Alzheimer's interferes with your brain's ability to metabolize glucose. There's some insulin resistance that takes place when you have age-based cognitive impairment. When they do neuroimaging on a brain with Alzheimer's, they show there is hypometabolism. Not enough metabolism is going on. Diabetes and Alzheimer's seem like they may be connected. So just generally being insulin resistant, generally your body, insulin resistance, meaning, you need insulin to metabolize glucose, carbohydrates. So if you have ketones instead of carbohydrates, you can recover cognitive function. This is all early. So it's like, I want to be careful not to say like this is solved. This is more like the first page of the chapter of like Alzheimer's researchers are looking at this. Like we are partnering with TBI researchers on this. We just submitted a 7-figure contract with another part of the US military to do specifically TBI research. So it's like, it's not a found conclusion, but it's like a strong enough hypothesis that it's worth putting some money behind and looking at it. Like the fundamental mechanisms of action seem to check out. And let's see what we find out.
Yeah, for sure. It's super cool. Do you feel like, if we're talking timeline wise, like how many years before like this research, it really solidifies, do you feel like? Because I know there's been, like when I wrote a book on the ketogenic diet, and so obviously I dove into the literature. This was back, I think my book was published in 2018. So, and when I did the study, obviously I dove into all the literature on ketogenic diets, ketones, all that jazz. And there was already some circulating with looking at obviously the ketogenic diet itself in Alzheimer's research, obviously insulin resistance, all that stuff. And then some has emerged obviously with implementing exogenous ketones. But like, what do you think is like the timeline? Is there any, is it 10 years, 20 years? Are we going to be dead?
I think that we're going to learn. I think like 5 years or less. I think I think part of the difficulty when the only way that you have for studying ketones for Alzheimer's, ketones for TBI, is when the only way you can do that is like put someone on the ketogenic diet or recruit participants into your study who are adhering to the ketogenic diet. Like we all know how hard it is to actually do the ketogenic diet. And especially, okay, you just had a TBI. Okay, fire up the avocado and bacon and eggs, right? Like it's a lot easier said than done. Or like if someone's older and facing cognitive decline, like it might be really hard for that person to do strict ketogenic diet. Should they do lower carb, lower sugar? Absolutely. But having the ability to drink a ketone is novel and interesting. And look, it's just like accelerating the rate at which science can take place, because instead of having to recruit, it's really hard to recruit participants who are doing, directly, like it's hard to recruit participants and make them do a ketogenic diet, or recruit participants who are already doing a ketogenic diet. If you just take normal population people and have them drink a ketone that is, drinkable, palatable, and, affordable, so it's, within a research budget, I think we've entered some phase change where there's 10x more science going on now and going forward than there has been. Like the next decade, we'll see 10x more science than the previous decade. So super bullish. We do a lot of it. So our research lead has a PhD in cardiac metabolism from Oxford, and we co-author papers. We run these research projects, 7-figure research projects with the DoD. We partner with places like UCSD and Harvard. And our general mission is to create science ourselves, but also light the fire that can burn everywhere, like help empower other researchers to do good work on this. And again, it's like we have created what I think, I consider what objectively is the most cost-efficient way to immediately raise blood ketone levels. So it's like we can almost get out of the way. It's like some cancer researcher has been looking at ketogenic diet for cancer for 20 years, and all of a sudden it's like, oh wow, I can elevate a patient or a mouse or whatever. I can elevate that ketone level directly, immediately. Like the science is accelerating, I would say. The rate of new knowledge creation is accelerating.
Yeah, for sure. So I have 2 more questions for you, and then we can kind of wrap it up. So the first one is kind of piggybacking off of what you just mentioned. As you know, ketone esters and the drinks become more popular now that the technology is kind of, coming, is there. How do people decipher between, like, for example, the salts? The salts came out and there was like so many different supplement products with the salts. The brand Prove It was one of them, obviously. Lots of other ones, right? Lots of other ones on the market. Some, like you said, maybe the cheap and dirty ones, some maybe more high quality. So when we're talking about the esters, how can people, decipher between, I guess, the cheap and dirty ones and the ones that are higher quality?
That's a great question. And you don't have to you shouldn't take my word or anyone's word for it. What you should do is have a ketone reader and measure your own blood ketone levels as you try different things out. Like that's what's cool about ketones in particular, is like, I don't know what like an acai berry does to shift your blood markers, right? Like there's all these like health trends and marketing buzzwords, and like a lot of it doesn't move the needle. A ketone, an exogenous ketone, should raise your ketone levels. Like that's the one thing it's supposed to do. So you can see for yourself, like, okay, I have 10 grams of this, I have 10 grams of option B, 10 grams of option C. What are my ketone levels at in 15 minutes, in an hour, in 2 hours? And you can literally see what your own curve looks like. I mean, if people are generally interested in doing that kind of study, I'd always recommend like doing it in a fasted state. Do it while you're sitting. Control for the variables. Don't do it like one day where you're fed and exercising and drinking ketones, and the next day you're doing it like while you're fasted and not exercising, right? Like control as many moving parts.
Do you recommend testing like in your blood, breath? Obviously there's blood, breath, urine. I know what my recommendation would be.
I'm hardcore. I mean, I'm curious yours. I always say go blood. Like I'm not squeamish personally, and it's definitely the most accurate. You can do some trade-offs of like, oh, I'm squeamish, I don't like blood, let me do the breath or the urine one. But the issue starts to be with those that like, it's just not directly what you're wanting to measure. Like when you're excreting, when you're urinating out like the waste product, like your body will, as your body gets better at using ketones, you'll be peeing out less. So like you actually might be better at elevating your ketones and metabolizing your ketones, but then your P score is lower. It's like, it's complicated. Sounds like you're cut from the same cloth, like go blood or go home.
Yeah. Cause I mean, that's just exactly what you said. You're measuring the excretion versus what's circulating in your blood. So when you're taking your blood measurement, that's literally what's in your blood, versus when you're peeing it out or you're breathing it out. I know I would say like from a ranking order, at least from what I've seen in the research, the urine is the least effective, and then breath, and then blood is kind of like the gold standard. But like you said, as your body understands more how to use ketones as fuel, then you're probably excreting less and things like that. We've talked a lot about that on the podcast in the past. But yeah, that makes sense. So my second question was, are there any negatives to taking ketones?
I would say the elephant in the room, I think we touched on it a little bit, is like ketones do have calories. So it's not this magical like calorie deleter. It's like if you have a shot of ketones, it will have if it's 10 grams ketones times 7 calories per gram, it'll have 70 calories in it. So you can't just have it on top of like an unhealthy diet and expect calories to go away. I think it's the main misnomer. I generally think like directionally, humans should be spending more time with elevated ketone levels. Ancestral humans, like there's no peanut butter cups on the savannah, right? Like there was no sugar when we were walking around 5, 6, 7 miles a day. There was maybe, I don't think ancestral humans were full on keto because like there was grains and berries, but it was not at the level it's at. There was no Slurpee, there's no big gulp, there's none of that. So like we were not maxing out on carbs, and we were also walking and burning that off a lot. We were intermittent
metabolically
fasting.
flexible.
we were MetFlex. Yeah, we were metabolically flexible, 100%. And so I would say like I'm not, I don't do strict keto diet myself. I think my message is spend more time with elevated ketones, whatever that means for you. And if you're getting there by doing 16 and 8 eating window, or cutting added sugars out of your diet, or having a carb-based meal only once a day, like whatever that means for you, like swapping your morning Frappuccino sugar bomb for like coffee and MCT, like little things that you can do to reduce your ambient blood glucose levels and increase the amount of time your body is spending with elevated ketones. I think that's directionally the way to go.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. Definitely all about the MetFlex here.
Yeah.
So one last question, because you mentioned it. So with MCTs, can we just chat really quickly about, because I feel like those had kind of like their peak, and like now they're kind of about like within everything nutrition, right? We have like kind of like a peak of them being within the like nutrition space, being popular, ketones, when they first came on the market, it was like a huge peak, and now we're kind of, I feel like we're leveling out, but now maybe now that the ketone esters are becoming more popular, maybe there's a little bit more of a peak. But with MCTs, do you find that combining the MCTs with the ketones elevate ketones even more? Or there's more other benefits besides just that?
Yeah, MCTs are interesting, right? We at H.V.M.N, my company, we sell an MCT. I think MCTs are great. And here, MCTs are the best possible precursor to ketones, right? So MCT, medium chain triglyceride, because of the chain length of that triglyceride, your body can quickly turn it into ketones. And even specifically within MCTs, you can have different carbon chain lengths that are considered at medium chain, to 6, 8, 10, 12. C8, caprylic acid, specifically the 8 carbon long MCT is the most ketogenic, that your body can turn it most readily into ketones. So we sell a pure C8 MCT oil powder. It's super popular. I will still say that the best MCT in the world it pales in comparison to just directly drinking a ketone. When you have both, like kind of as a 1-2 punch, that's really interesting, right? If you have your kind of bulletproof coffee, black coffee with MCT and a shot of ketones, I think that is interesting because you're doubling into it, and hey, you got to eat something, right? So if your source of calories is healthy fats that are non-insulinogenic and generally ketogenic, and then you're having a shot of ketones, I think that's an interesting way. That's a pattern a lot of people, including myself, like we'll start out the day doing that and then not really have anything remotely carby until like lunch or even dinner. That's one way to do it. I think that, MCT, I think made a lot of promises that I would say ketones themselves can more directly deliver on. Because the MCT, like I'm talking like a 10-to-1. Like if you like MCT will bring you to like 0.1, 0.2 millimole of ketones if you also don't eat anything else besides that. Ketones, just our Ketone IQ product, like it will immediately get you to 1.0, 2.0, depending on how much you have of it, like immediately. So it's a 10x. So I'm not gonna say like MCT is good. I'm not gonna say MCT is not good. I'm gonna say that it can also be part of the picture. It's great to swap out, but it's not going to be as extreme of a ketone boost as just a direct drinkable ketone.
Gotcha. Another tool in the toolbox.
Another tool in the toolbox.
Yeah. And MCTs, again, have calories, as you mentioned.
Yes.
So not like a magic free-for-all on all of those. And then, so lastly, I know I keep saying lastly, I just want to make sure that we kind of reiterate the kind of benefits of potentially using a ketone ester over salt. And one of the main things, just to kind of drive this point home for what you mentioned about, all the other ones out on the market, and things like that, just esters versus salts. It's not that necessarily, salt in itself is bad for you or anything like that, but the amount that you would have to consume of a ketone salt would be so much that it would definitely cause some GI issues for the person, compared to consuming a ketone ester, where you could raise your ketones to, 10x or whatever with an amount that is not going to cause that GI distress. Is that correct?
Yeah, you nailed it. And you can see it on the back of the supplements facts panel of the salt. It's like for a serving or like a small amount, you're going to like several hundreds or thousands percent of your recommended daily value of salt. And that serving is just not going, that's already a lot of salt. And the amount of ketones in that serving is not going to elevate your ketones that much, but it'll be very cheap.
Yeah.
But you can't, it's like, the thing is, it doesn't stack. You can't have like, oh, I like a little bit of ketones, so what if I have 5 scoops? It's like, no, you're going to blow out your guts. Like you're not going to, you can't actually, it's like, you can't just like add it like that.
Yeah, for sure. That makes sense. And are there, again, I know this is, I swear, like 2 more minutes.
This is fun. There's a lot of ground to cover. This is a lot of fun, Rachel.
Yeah. So for the esters, have there been any, like, has anybody noticed any negative effects with like GI distress or anything when consuming the ester drink? Have you like heard any feedback on that? Or is it like maybe more individualized?
We're clear on up to like 3.5 servings a day. I could say anecdotally, like that's what like FDA considers like generally regarded as safe. I can say anecdotally, like I've had more. I know some people have had more. I will say that like we haven't had like serious adverse events reported. Like people sometimes more so it's like some people will try it in like a small amount and like they don't really get it. Like it tends to be people who are less metabolically flexible and their body doesn't know what to do with ketone at first. And like they don't really feel anything. Usually people who are, CrossFit or super like metabolically flexible, like they respond pretty well to it. So I would say less of the issue of like we see very, very little or no instance of like, like stomach upset, and more of like, some people, this is like 11 out of 10, they want it all the time. And other people are kind of like, like I don't really get it. Maybe I should try 2 shots. And like, it didn't work as much as I thought it would. So we see that more than stomach upset. Yeah.
Okay. And then I swear this is the last question. For testing, if someone like doesn't necessarily want to test their ketones, for me, I've gone like like I said from the beginning, I'm a data nerd. So I go through periods where I'm testing different things. So I do obviously have a keto monitor, blood glucose monitor, continuous, blood glucose monitor, all that jazz. I don't necessarily do it on a regular basis, but when I'm doing experiments for myself, I love to see that data. But someone who maybe doesn't want to necessarily geek out on kind of the objective metrics, right? For, their ketone levels being raised, things like that. What should they be looking for when they take the ketone ester in terms of their subjective feelings of that? And I know this is maybe a little bit hard because obviously sometimes there's a placebo effect to things. So are there like specifics in terms of like noticeable, like how long, I drink the full serving, how long should it take for me to feel something, or will I feel something, or can we just like chat about that for a second?
Yeah, it hits quick. It's as quick as a cup of coffee. So, how long does a cup of coffee take? Like kind of 10, 15 minutes, and it can ramp up from there. What you'll feel is if people are used to fasting or low carb, or that feeling when you're kind of in the zone through the workday, maybe you like miss a meal and you're just really dialed in. It's that feeling. It's this kind of like open behind the eyeballs, like alert, nice flow state. You're alert without being jittery. I think a lot of times caffeine can make you kind of like jittery. It's more anxiety inducing. Ketones is more like your eyes are open and you feel like you just woke up from like a fresh nap. Another way to think about it too is like a lot of people like runner's high, right? Like people, I don't know, crazy people like you and me, like will like getting out after it for 10, 15 miles. And part of what runner's high is that your body's begun to produce ketones, and ketones are providing your brain with energy. So it's a little bit of runner's high in a bottle. It's pretty unique. Like, I think that's what's interesting too, is if you like drew out the map of kind of psychological ways that you can feel from, oh, nicotine does this, caffeine does this, alcohol does this, like if you drew out the map of what everything makes you feel, ketones are kind of in their own little region where you could it's kind of like caffeine or nicotine because it gives you a little energy, but it's kind of like L-Theanine because it's reduces your anxiety. It's its own unique thing. And like, it's kind of like describing a color by using other colors. It's like, what really is red?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Yeah, that makes sense. And yeah, you mentioned L-Theanine. I'm a huge fan of L-Theanine in my coffee every morning. Talked about that a lot. But yeah, so I'm excited to try the product. I think I tried the first version, how we talked about this off air, over a year ago, whenever that was. It definitely felt like more than a year ago, maybe 2 years ago that you guys first came out with that.
We came out with the version 1 in 2017, had it on market for a couple of years, and then we took it off market to retool, and then we just launched V2. Right now we're talking March of 2022, and we launched that in January of 2022.
Gotcha. Okay. So is V2 it's going to be?
It's available.
It's available. Okay.
Yeah, it's available starting January of this year. So you can go to H.V.M.N.com. You can Google H.V.M.N. or Ketone IQ is what this specific product is called.
Yeah. So like I said, for me, when I, like with exogenous ketones, I don't particularly use them myself. I've used them in the past, like just tested out, mostly testing the salts and things like that, and getting the adverse reaction from trying to up the dose with those. And then, back when you guys first came out with your first product, for me, it was kind of just the cost to benefit, just like any other supplement. The cost to benefit for me wasn't worth it. And so recommend it for my clients. I wouldn't do something like that, but I'm super excited to, try out this version 2. And I will probably I don't know, I probably should have tried it out before we did this podcast. And so I could give kind of like my experience, but maybe we'll have to do a part 2, or I usually record the intro for the podcast afterwards. So maybe I'll wait to record that and give my feedback in the intro and conclusion in a few weeks. But yeah, I mean, one of the things I think that we always have to think about too, when we're talking about any type of supplement, is the cost to benefit ratio for the individual. And then also the quality of the product, and realizing that, yeah, maybe it is a little bit more expensive compared to other ones, but you get what you pay for especially with supplements. This is something that I try to, tell my clients all the time, you get what you pay for. So if something is a little bit more expensive, there's probably a reason for it. And if you don't want to, invest in that, then again, it's the cost benefit ratio for you and what makes the most sense for you. But if it is something that you feel like could benefit you within, your everyday life, with concentration throughout the day, starting your day off with maybe some MCTs and some ketones, versus whatever else you're doing, even if it's like a bulletproof coffee with tons of butter in it, maybe there's a little bit of a different benefit there. Or if it's, starting off with like a sugary bowl of cereal, I don't know. Tons of different people listening to this podcast, but yeah, so I think it's just kind of all coming back to, thinking about, how it could benefit you, and realizing also, like you said, it's just another tool in the toolbox. It's not a magic pill, but for me, I have over the years come to the conclusion for myself and for some of my clients that there are certain supplements out there that can be beneficial if we use them appropriately, and if we find the ones that are actually efficaciously dosed and high quality, right? But obviously health, diet, sleep, stress management, exercise, all of those foundational things come first. So there's no getting past that, like you mentioned. But anyway, this is a really cool conversation, and I am super excited to try it out. And like I said, hopefully I'll be able to mention my results, or how I kind of felt in the intro, outro of this episode. But yeah, do you want to tell our listeners and viewers where they can find you? anywhere that you like, social media, websites, anything like that?
Yeah. And there's a bottle on its way to you now.
Awesome.
So, or I think we might need your address, but my team is going to follow up. And yeah, you can find us. So my company's called Health via Modern Nutrition. So you can type in H.V.M.N.com, type it into Google. Our product in particular is called Ketone IQ. So that's where we really figured out the best technology for blood ketones per dollar. So most efficient way to raise blood ketones per dollar. We call it Ketone IQ. Also include, we figured out how to make it taste reasonably palatable. It does taste, just so people know, it tastes like sake or something. It doesn't taste like, water or lemonade or something. It has a little bit of like a mouth feel or something. It has a taste to it. Just so people know, you can find me in particular. I'm pretty active on Twitter. I'm BDM runner, BDM_runner. My name is Michael Brandt, and yeah, happy to chat. I love to hear from people and learn and trade notes. So happy to meet people online. And I'll be at Metabolic Health Summit as well.
Yes.
So if anyone's there, drop a line, stop by our booth. Yeah.
Cool. Awesome. So I'll link all of that in the show notes so people can check it out. But this was great. I was excited to have you on because I really wanted to dive into all things exogenous ketones, especially just because I have been a skeptic of them for a little while, especially my listeners who have heard me kind of, I think they're, like we talked about, there are benefits, but you have to make sure that you are, educated on those benefits and also the product that you're using, and being able to decipher between the ones that are on the market that are, efficaciously dosed versus ones that will just cause you to run to the bathroom if you take too much. So yeah, super, super fun conversation. And thank you so much for coming on.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Rachel. It's a lot of fun.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Michael. I definitely enjoyed chatting with him about a subject that I've personally seen grow over several years as technology and science continue to evolve. As I mentioned in the intro, if this episode got you intrigued about ketone esters and you want to try the product out for yourself, Michael has provided me with a discount code for all viewers and listeners of MetFlex and Chill. So that direct link is going to be in the description, or you can go to H.V.M.N.com and use the code MetFlex for that exclusive discount. But remember, no supplement, not even the newest of the newest technology, is going to do the work for you. I say this all the time and I need to repeat it. It's not going to do the work for you. You have to put in the effort yourself over the long term with lifestyle choices in order to see the results that you want and to maintain those results. So yes, there can be benefits to supplements and ketone esters, and they can be a great tool in your toolbox perhaps. But again, you still have to put in the effort to make the lifestyle changes necessary to get to where you want to be over the long term. So I hope you enjoy the rest of your day, and I will see you back here on the next episode of MetFlex and Chill.